All right, call the October 12th Planning Board meeting to order. Ask everyone to stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does anyone have any disqualifications this evening? Hearing none, we have a quorum with 4. Ask for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes for September 14th. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes? All right. I have a motion for approval of the minutes.
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. All right. No old business. New business. We have PB 2120, Baxter Station. Allied Properties LLC is requesting conditional rezoning of 53.43 acres owned by Jarvis Harvest LLC from agriculture zoning district to conditional mixed residential zoning district to allow 80 single-family detached lots within an age-restricted community located in Moyock on the south side of Baxter Lane, adjoining Baxter Lane Estates to the east and Hidden Oaks to the south. Tax map 9, lot 25A, Moyock Township. And Ms. Glaive.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to orient you to the location, this is just a context map. You'll see the yellow line across the top is the state line. That's North Point. And Baxter Lane is right here. And when we zoom in, you can get a better idea of where it is. This is the Bank of Currituck. And I think over here is now a DMV something. I saw a sign.
Yep.
So the current zoning of the property is agricultural. And you can see the surrounding neighborhoods. There's some conditional single-family mainland, some conditional MXR, and then, of course, some general business near the highway. Something important to note here is that this is designated as rural in the land use plan. And the, whoops, hit the wrong button. And the surrounding areas, you'll see that there's some full service. Well, with the density that's being requested, since this is rural, it wouldn't be allowed to have the density in the rural designation in the land use plan. But since the Moyock Small Area Plan calls it full service, and that's a more specific tailored plan for the area, there'll be a land use plan amendment that'll run simultaneously with this. So if the board chooses to approve the rezoning of to conditional MXR, what'll happen is the land use plan map would automatically be amended so that way there's not a conflict with that land use plan map. And that's a general statute, relatively new, that in the last couple of years, that your land use map would automatically be amended. This is the conceptual layout of the plan. You would enter either entrance or exit, however you want to say that. You can see this is the drainage pond that will also be used as an amenity. And another amenity is in the back. There is a dog park. And there is a connection to Hidden Oaks down to the south. It may look familiar to you. The board did see this in 2019, but a slightly different version. That was a planned development residential conditional zoning request. That plan had 103 single-family dwellings, 44 duplexes. Its minimum lot size was 10,000 square feet, and they were going to construct an on-site wastewater treatment plant. The planning board did deny that request because it was inconsistent with the land use plan and the Moyoc small area plan. And y'all determined that it was incompatible with surrounding subdivisions and neighborhoods. It was also served by Moyoc Elementary School, which was at capacity at the time and remains at capacity, over capacity, I should say, today. And the developer did withdraw that request before the Board of Commissioners heard that. This request is a conditional zoning to MXR. It's for 80 single-family dwelling units, and they are proposing a 55 and older community, and all of the occupants in the subdivision would have to be 55 or older. That would be enforced through a private restrictive covenant and the HOA would assess ages. The packet said every 2 years, and the HOA would be responsible for enforcing that age restriction. According to the applicant's attorney, Currituck County can accept age-restricted covenants as legally enforceable conditional zoning conditions. Can't talk about this area of the county without talking about drainage. Our soil and stormwater manager says this area of the county is his #1 complaint call in beach, mainland, so on. Stormwater inundation and flooding in the area. The applicant is proposing several conditions to help with the drainage in the area. #1 is that Baxter Lane ditch will be improved. The on-site stormwater storage will be designed to hold a 100-year storm, hold that storm on its own property, and they will install berms if necessary to do that. And they are offering to fix an undersized, let me go back so you can see where, an undersized culvert at Baxter. This is Baxter Lane extension down here. So there's an undersized culvert there that they're offering to fix. The amenities plan, you can see the one better in your packet perhaps, but there is a dog park and a waterfront garden, and that waterfront garden has landscaping, walking paths, pergola, and seating. We've talked about the reclassification in the land use plan from rural to full service as it is in the Moyoc small area plan. This is a density comparison that the Board of Commissioners has asked us to include in our staff reports just to give you an idea of what's allowed now versus what is being requested. This is just raw data. It's based on no review of the actual property, soil conditions, anything. It's just raw data and should just be used for reference purposes only. But currently, the developer could subdivide the property. Since it's agricultural, it will require a conservation subdivision, and he would have two choices as to how to develop the conservation subdivision. The first is a 50% open space, where he'd be allowed a density of 0.33 units an acre. Both of these choices have 30,000 square foot minimum lot size. So under choice 1, he'd get, let's say, roughly 17 lots. If he bumps up the open space to 60%, that also bumps up the density a little bit to 0.4 units per acre, and he could get about 23 lots. So the request before you, assuming the full service land use plan amendment is approved, is for 80 lots at a 15,000 square foot minimum lot size. They're proposing 38% open space, which is above the 30 required. And they'd be allowed up to 2 units per acre. And this proposal before you is 1.49 units per acre. And I don't want to bore you, but since these will be conditions that will ultimately be shared with the commissioners and in the approval report. I'll try to summarize them and not read them to you, but I want to go over each one of them. What I said earlier, the commissioners and the applicant or the property owner would have to mutually agree upon the conditions. And these are the conditions that the applicant is offering. Number one is regarding that age restriction that we talked about, that everyone will be 55 or older, and basically that the HOA is responsible for enforcement. The next set of improvements are regarding drainage. We've talked about how they'll be improving Baxter Lane ditch. And based on model results, they'll make improvements to the Baxter Lane ditch along the Baxter Station portion of the ditch, that property. Sorry. I can hear you, so I can't. Thanks. The developer, let's see, let's go back to the drainage improvements. So, perform modeling of the Baxter ditch to its outlet at Jarvis Landing, at the Jarvis property, also known as the Landing subdivision. And they're offering, based on model results, they'll make improvements to the Baxter Lane ditch along the Baxter Station property boundary, including widening, deepening, laying back the side slopes and putting on proper grade, and improvements to be completed before putting the first phase of the subdivision to record. They'll record an easement along Baxter Station part of the ditch for ongoing maintenance. And they'll include a provision in the covenants so that way the folks in the HOA will know that it's their responsibility to maintain that ditch. And as we discussed, they're offering to manage a 100-year storm event on the property. And if the county is able to obtain necessary right of entry agreements for the private properties off-site, then the existing undersized culvert at Baxter Lane Extension will be replaced and proper size culvert set at the proper grade. Dylan, our soil and stormwater manager, does say that these proposed conditions will help improve the drainage in that location. These are conditions that the TRC is recommending be added, and one is that there is a water line under that undersized culvert at the end of Baxter Lane Extension. So the Public Utilities is requesting that when that culvert is replaced, that water line be either moved or deepened. It's something that they would work out with the Public Utilities Director. Because, as I was told, it's not good to be driving over a water line. Should the developer stop participating in the HUD Age-Restricted Community Program, and that's who, I'm sorry if I didn't say that earlier, HUD is who regulates the 55 and over communities, then they would need to come back for an amended zoning request approval prior to those less than 55 being able to occupy a dwelling unit. The 2006 Land Use Plan Amendment would have to be approved as part of the motion for approval of this rezoning. I'll briefly touch on this. We've talked about it some, but it is in the Moyock sub-area. And the policy emphasis is on managing the growth. It calls it an urban level of growth that the area experiences. In areas where on-site wastewater is proposed, the land use plan does support 1 to 2 units per acre, so this would be compliant with that. And then for consistency, the land use plan policy that's used there is HN1, which speaks to appropriate location and density factors. The Moyock Small Area Plan, again, identifies this as full service, and that does speak to higher amounts of activity and can be higher densities as well. The compatibility standard there that was used was policy FLU1 that speaks to compatibility between new developments and existing developments. Planning staff has a few concerns that we wanted to bring to the board's attention. One, that participating in that HUD regulated program for age-restricted communities is a voluntary action. So if the developer chooses not to participate in that program and wants to allow folks less than 55 to live there, the conditional zoning district would have to be amended. And one of the biggest concerns for the area right now is the school capacity. As you heard Kevin say earlier, that with the new numbers that he got from the superintendent, Moyoc is very much over capacity. And it's understood that the HOA will be responsible for enforcing the age restriction requirements, but it should be noted that, as you know, enforcement often falls to the county. And if that were to happen, we're not even sure that we could legally enforce that regulation. As I was told, the county doesn't want to be in the eviction business. Not that it would get to that, but that was a concern that was expressed. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but these are the review standards in the UDO for considering a legislative zoning decision, which is a conditional zoning. The UDO does require consistency and reasonableness statement. This conditional zoning request is consistent with and amends the 2006 land use plan by designating it as full service. The request is reasonable and in keeping with the changed conditions acknowledged by the Moyoc Small Area Plan and demonstrates a community need for providing full service. Now, I'm not going to read these to you either, but they're in your packet and we have discussed them. And what this is that provided that adequate public facilities are available, and there's an upcoming meeting regarding public facilities other than just schools. They're looking at water, they're looking at fire, rescue, so on and so forth. So that's why I said provided adequate public facilities are available to serve the proposed development. TRC does recommend approval and ask that the Board of Commissioners accept all of these conditions that the applicant proposed. And then including these recommendations that the TRC made, and we read through those earlier. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Glave? I have one.
Yes, sir.
There's a couple sets of things here, and if we make a motion one way or the other, want to make sure we get it all included in there.
Mm-hmm.
So both sets of these recommendations need to be in a motion.
Right. If you choose to approve or recommend approval of the request, then when you make your consistency and reasonableness statement, you would just address this part, plan that the 2006 land use plan be amended by designating this property as full service.
Right.
That would address both the land use plan portion that has to be amended, and then it would also address the requirements for consistency and reasonableness
And then
for the conditional zoning.
the 1 and 2 agreed upon conditions, and then the 3 technical review recommendations as
Right.
well.
But the applicant has to agree to those TRC recommendations.
Okay, just making sure. All right, I was just checking. We don't have, yeah, so I wanted to get it straight. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
We kind of went over that earlier, so my questions have been answered.
Gotcha. Gary, you good for now?
I'm good for now.
All right. Well, anybody here to represent the case? You want to come on up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mark Bissell, 3512 North Croatan Highway, Kitty Hawk. And there is a brief PowerPoint presentation I wanted to try to get loaded up here. There we go, the Baxter
first one.
Station PB.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, wow, we have some news.
We don't get to see you drive the Arrow tonight?
Is it up there? She might not have put it out for us. Just tell me when you want
I
me to
don't have any
change.
tools up here that
Okay.
She didn't leave it for us. Just tell me when you want it changed.
Okay, thanks. No, go ahead. As Ms. Glaive said, the summary of the request is to rezone this 53.4 acre tract to mixed residential for an age-restricted community with 80 single-family lots and a density of 1.49. I'd like to just talk to you about some of the key elements of the plan here. We have redesigned this thing since we saw you a couple of years ago and the density is really just a little over half of what we were proposing back then, and we have redesigned it in order to be able to maximize the amount of stormwater that we can retain on site. So as you can see, we're providing adjacent to Baxter Lane a pretty good sized lake, and in fact we've made it as big as we can while still allowing room between the lake and Baxter Lane to widen this Baxter Lane outfall ditch that you've been hearing about. So this, as Ms. Glaive indicated, will be designed to retain the 100-year storm on site and still release it. It'll also be a nice amenity. We do have roadway connectivity, as she indicated, to Hidden Oaks. We've also emphasized the western entrance. You know, the neighborhood really indicated that they would prefer one entrance, but in consultation with the planning staff, we all kind of felt that two really was a better design, but we're emphasizing the western one so that really most of the traffic coming from to and from 168, we're expecting we'll use that and kind of have a minimal impact on the neighborhood. And we're also providing tree buffers on not only the two sides on the east and the south against existing development, but also along Baxter Lane to kind of, so the development is set well back from the road behind the lake, and there's also a tree buffer along Baxter Lane to minimize that impact. So we're just kind of minimizing the impacts wherever we can. Up against Baxter Lane Estates, there's already a buffer that ranges from about 75 to a couple hundred feet, so we're adding to that. And there's a buffer that ranges from about 50 to 100 feet against Hidden Oaks, and we're adding to that buffer. If we go to the next slide, this shows some of the amenities. We have a nice entrance feature at the west end. We have a dog park, and the next, if we can just advance it, we'll show you the details. We're going to have this nice sense of arrival when you get to that entrance for Baxter Station. Nice landscape entrance. On the next slide, we're going to have this is going to be the dog park that's in the southwestern corner of the site, which is connected by, which will have some parking spaces. It's also has pedestrian connectivity. We do have, and I didn't mention it earlier, good pedestrian connectivity all through the site. And then we have a real nice feature on the next slide that is kind of an area where people can congregate on the lakeside there. Very nice landscaped area, some park benches, picnic areas, possibly a fire pit, places for games and so forth, and really just for neighborhood interaction. So, and people also have an opportunity to do some gardening there. So we think it'll be a nice facility that's really appropriate for this age-targeted group. If we could go to the next slide, as indicated, all units are restricted to occupants 55 years and older. This will be a covenant in the HOA documents. The declaration will require a recertification of that restriction every 2 years. And that restriction can also be enforced through both federal and state law. And there's a letter in your packet from the applicant's attorney on packet page 75 that outlines all the different ways that these age restrictions can be enforced and will be enforced. The next slide talks about the drainage conditions. Again, modeling Baxter Lane ditch, which has never been, to my knowledge, modeled. So we're going to do an extensive topographic survey of that ditch and its outlet. We're going to create a stormwater model to find out how much water that ditch can handle now and how much water it can handle after we widen it and lay it back, and kind of quantify how much we will be able to improve that ditch. Again, widening it, deepening it. If you've ever looked at that ditch, it's really not very much of a ditch. It's narrow, it's overgrown. It doesn't really have a lot of carrying capacity, so we can significantly improve that. We can also will record a permanent maintenance easement and create a funding mechanism for ongoing maintenance of that ditch so that this problem doesn't recur down the road. Also, we're going to construct berms to make sure that we're retaining that 100-year storm event on site and not adversely impacting adjoining properties. And then also, if we could go to the next slide, we looked at an earlier version of this slide at the last meeting when we were talking about windswept pines, and that red line and arrow to the north is the new drainage outfall that we talked about that will be running to the east to provide some relief there. Because right now all of the water from, or almost all of the water from windswept pines comes through that Baxter Lane ditch, and this will provide some relief. But when we improve the Baxter Lane ditch, as you see in the red arrow toward the bottom of the page, that'll significantly improve the water's ability to flow. But then there's this culvert, and this is really one of the final zoning commitments, is to replace that culvert, because that is a constriction. Right now there are 60-inch pipes that are feeding into what I believe is a 36-inch pipe. And not only is it undersized, but it's about 2 feet higher than it should be, because there's a water line that it rests on. And it's on private property. So nobody's really been able to solve this problem, but Dylan Lloyd has been working to obtain the right of access to be able to improve that, and he has actually given me copies of those agreements. Those people have agreed to allow this to be done. So the water department has asked for this additional condition that water line be lowered, and we're agreeable to that. And staff has asked that the additional condition be provided to amend the zoning if the age restriction ever ceases. And you know, we're offering the age restriction as a zoning condition, so it's really the same as any other zoning condition. But we're certainly agreeable to put in that, to add in that condition to the zoning commitments. So Ms. Glave went through the conditional zoning standards, of which there are 11. There are 8 of them shown on this slide. I won't read them all again, and the last 3, but I will kind of run through them. The next slide shows the consistency with the land use plan. Basically, the Moyoc sub-area recognizes a density of 1 to 2 units per acre, and we're at 1.49. The small area plan, full service density would suggest 1.5 to 3. We are at the low end of that. As Ms. Glave indicated, per 160D, the rezoning will simultaneously amend the 2000 land use plan, 6th land use plan, and make it consistent also. The change in conditions include the demand for housing in Moyoc, the full service district that was suggested by the steering committee, and then of course the aging population. We have seen demographics that show that in the next 20 years, as much as half of the population will be in this age category that's looking for housing. So in terms of addressing community need, the Baxter Lane ditch, as you know, is a key drainage outlet, and we will improve that and remove the downstream constriction. It is not in conflict with the UDO. Of course, we will be applying for a special use permit at the next stage if the zoning request is approved, and will meet all applicable standards of the UDO. It's compatible with the surrounding development. Lots are 50% larger than those at Hidden Oaks, directly to the south. The zoning district is the same as the zoning across the street at Windswept Pines. It's set back and buffered from the highway, so it should be compatible. We don't anticipate any adverse impacts. As we indicated, we'll manage our own drainage to the 100-year storm event. We'll help with the neighborhood drainage, and we actually expect this to have a positive impact on the nearby lands. It is a logical development pattern. If we could skip to the one after that, this just kind of shows the development pattern that you have now in the area. And this is really filling in the missing piece, because the land is basically all developed all the way around. You have in green Windswept Pines and Hidden Oaks to the north and south. To the east, you already have the development of Baxter Lane Estates, and across the highway you have of course, Currituck Station. So this is really the final piece on the east side of the highway in this area. The next slide shows we don't really have any anticipated negative environmental impacts. There aren't any wetlands on the site or any wildlife that we're aware of. We will be restoring some vegetative buffers where there are no longer trees. And again, a positive impact on stormwater management. We're anticipating 0 impact on schools, and any other public facility impacts we should be able to address through good design. And we will bring an appraiser to provide testimony at the special use permit stage, but we actually anticipate that this project will have a positive impact on land values. We think it will be in the public interest, and we think that we can certainly design it to be in harmony with the UDO standards. Now we just have, a couple of typical homes that show that, the homes will be compatible with what else has been constructed in this area. My conclusion, and I think your conclusion, hopefully from this presentation, is that this request does meet the 11 standards for approval of conditional zoning, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Excuse me. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bissell?
I do. I'm looking at this letter from Parker Poe, Jamie, is it Schwedler?
Schwadler?
Schwedler, okay. Yeah, if you go on to the second page, it starts talking about federal and state fair housing statutes. And I'm getting a little confused because on this, it's that middle paragraph. It's basically, it says these acts provide an exception for housing, basically housing communities that, for a better term, discriminate people on familial status. In order to qualify for this exception, at least 80% of the development development's occupied units must be occupied by at least one person, 55, means 55 years of age or older. That, if I'm just reading that, and maybe somebody in planning or somebody with a little bit more understanding of this, that it seems to me that 20% of this development may not fall. I'm just, this is confusing me.
Well, the federal fair housing standard, that's really the minimum standard, but what we're saying is that we're going to adhere to a 100% standard. So we're going to go above what the federal fair housing standard requires and make it 100% 55 and over.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
There was a subdivision that once was a 55 and older, I believe that was called Waterside Village. Did they have the same conditions put on them, and did they come back and, this might be for the planning staff, did they come back and request because of hardship or some reason to change it? Because we know now it's not 55 and older.
They did. They, that was, if I think I'm remembering the correct term, it was a retirement overlay district, I believe.
Right. There was actually a zoning district
Yeah.
at that time that you don't have in the current UDO that was called a adult retirement community zoning overlay district. It was it's like a PUD zoning overlay, but it was an age restriction overlay. And when the recession hit in 2007, 2008, and the housing market got really, really tough, the age-restricted housing market in Grandy became, was really the first to go. And so after the bank foreclosed on that, they came back to the county and asked that zoning be amended to remove that age restriction, which the county agreed to. But it did require an action by the county commissioners to make that change. But we don't anticipate that, we think this will be very successful in Moyoc. Grandy's always been a little bit soft, but it's started to take off now.
That is a concern, being that the schools are over capacity. Also, the easements. I'm kind of a little bit confused that the county's going out and getting the easements. Is that normal, that the county obtain the easements?
We've been, the county has worked with us on those on the last couple of projects because it's really easier for the county to obtain an easement for a public benefit like drainage than it is for a developer. Some people think, well, if I assist the developer, my neighbors are going to be unhappy with me, or what can I get from the developer, what have you.
So this really does hinge on you getting all the easements as well. I mean, you need these.
We need that approval in order to be able to replace that pipe, but those, we're told that those agreements are actually in place.
Oh, okay.
Anyone else? Anything else?
I just had one more question on the verification of those 55 and older, that occurs every 2 years, according to the little proposed declaration for that. And then it says in providing that they do that to certify that there's at least one occupant 55 or older in that unit, and then provides for the enforcement of that restriction. Is there any particular mechanism or means of enforcement? It's kind of a nebulous term, a general term of enforcement of such, providing for enforcement of that restriction. In other words, what's the remedy if that restriction is violated?
I believe they would have to sell the house if they're not meeting the standard.
And who would be the enforcer on that? The homeowners association?
Association would. And even the neighbors could too. They could bring a lawsuit under these provisions. But my expectation is once this thing gets established, and of course there's going to be real close scrutiny at the beginning. But then the people who live there are probably going to self-enforce it without having to resort to these other mechanisms. Of course, these mechanisms are available to them if there's just a blatant violation of it.
Has there been a traffic study done for Currituck Highway and Baxter? It seems a little hard to get out there. At least for me, it is.
There has been for Currituck Highway, but to my knowledge, there hasn't been a traffic study for Baxter Lane. What I'm expecting to happen with Baxter is once the Currituck station gets going across the street, there's going to be a traffic light at that location because that's one of the primary entrances to the mega site.
Anything else? You good there, Gary?
Okay.
All right. Well, nobody else has any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't see anybody from the public. This young lady looks like she's with y'all. So,
She's with us.
okay. All right. So we'll open and close the public comment. Any further discussion? One way or the other, however, you have to be crafty with your motion tonight because we're going to have to make
We
it.
have the cheat sheet.
Right.
I apologize for that.
We have to make sure to get all of these things in it if that's how the route you choose to go. Just adding that in there. So, any further discussion? I'll open the floor for a motion. I'll make a motion to approve, and let me see if I can get all the stuff correct. So, I'll move to approve PB 2120 because the request is consistent and reasonable. The conditional zoning request is consistent with and amends the 2006 land use plan by designating this property as full service on the future land use map because the amendment recognizes and implements the full service designation of the Moyock Small Area Plan adopted by the Board of Commissioners. The request is reasonable and in keeping with the change conditions acknowledged by the Moyock Small Area Plan and address the demonstrated community needs of providing a full service area, including the two agreed upon, assuming y'all are agreeing to these, the two agreed upon conditions of approval recommended by technical review, and the three on the second page recommended by technical review. And with that, I think that's it.
Good job.
So, a second?
Second.
We have a motion, second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So, we're tied again.
So it'll go forward with a denial
So
recommendation.
we'll just, whatever you did last time.
Yep.
Okay?
And then it's an approval then. Because whatever the motion is, then it goes with that motion if it's a tie.
They'll still see the vote. We put the vote in there.
I think it has to be a clear majority to pass.
Oh, okay.
So a tie is,
Yeah, there's no point in running a denial because the vote would be the same.
but anyway, so it's going in the record as a tie?
It'll go on the record as a denial, but the voting record will show that it was a 2-2 vote.
Okay. All right. So we don't need to make any more motions. Unless somebody else wants to make another motion. That motion tied. You're welcome to make something. It had different conditions or something, but. Okay. Well, with that, there's no other items. So, announcements? That's it?
If you want to talk about the meetings upcoming with the school
Yeah,
board.
I'll do a couple announcements. The meeting's upcoming, as I mentioned earlier, on October 18th, next Monday. There will be I believe it'll start at 4:30. The Board of Commissioners will be looking at the finances of the county and looking at the capital improvement projects that are proposed in a goal to prioritize where we want to spend our money. So that's next Monday, November 15th, I believe, the second meeting in November. There will be a meeting specific to the Moyoc area and the new wastewater plant. Now, to give you an idea, originally it was contracted to be designed for 100,000 gallons per day with the option to expand to 200. We're finding that is very substandard. And so now we're looking at whether or not we want to design for a 200,000 gallon per day or a 300,000 gallon per day. The cost implications of that, it's 200,000 we're being told is about $11 million. To bump it up to 300, it goes up to about 15 million. So it's, do you spend your money up front or do you have the option to, expand at a later date? So that will be happening in November. Later this month is a school board meeting where they'll go over those capacity numbers in our facility study. To give you what the Board of Commissioners did with your items you heard last month, the Monterey Shores Outer Banks Venture land use map amendment, you recommended for denial, they recommended for approval on that with a 6-0 vote. The Windswept Pines Phase 3 was recommended for approval at a 5-1 vote, and the Sam Miller rezoning down south of the high school was recommended for denial at a 4-2 vote. So those were the actions from last month for them. And that's all I've got. The only thing, if you come by the municipal center or municipal building here on a Friday, you'll probably see a lot of people in jeans. Although that's not the dress code here, the board altered our dress code for charitable purposes, and for $2, I believe, each Friday, you can wear jeans, and the proceeds go to Operation Santa.
Yeah.
And we're having very good turnout so far. Most people are.
That's a local program? Is that a
Yes.
local program?
Any county employee
Okay.
can participate.
One thing, Kevin, when going forward, when we're talking about wastewater and volumes and all that, is there a way that we can take that math and get it put in the number of housing units? So we know on an average, this size housing unit creates this much wastewater. Because I hear that, but it doesn't really
Absolutely.
equate to what we're looking at.
I think Albemarle Regional Health calculates it by bedrooms.
Right.
So it's like 150 gallons a bedroom.
So we'd have to look
Like
at,
that.
but I mean, so
Don't-
that's.
don't
that's-
hold me to
but
that
that's the
number, but
formula we would
that's
use
what-
then.
What I
They
could do
change
is
that.
I could get a cheat sheet of sorts. It's close, it's 120 per bedroom is what the calculator, so a 4-bedroom would be 480 per day. The actual usage tends to be much less. Just to give you an example, our engineer, Eric, did a study of the Moyoc plant. And for residents in the Moyoc plant right now, they are averaging 108 per day. So it's actually much less than the state makes us design for. But when we do new subdivisions, we factor in that 120 per bedroom.
Yeah, you want to make sure you got it.
And I
You don't
think
want to run short.
what you'll start hearing too are flow reductions. And what that is over some amount of time, if it shows like, okay, well, this subdivision, is only using 120 a day instead of 480 we designed for, they can apply to the state for a flow reduction, which would increase the availability at a plant.
To other houses to tie in onto that.
Correct.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think I would be happy to make up a cheat sheet, which
Which
kind
is
of puts
good
it
because
in
that puts it in
plain English and-
apples and, yeah, we're comparing exactly what we
Great
need to,
idea, yeah.
what we need to see, because that means nothing.
And then we could throw into, I think it'd be interesting to put down there like what a convenience store is, what the food line uses, so then you get that
Yeah, any type of
comparison
commercial
as well.
development, yeah, because I know restaurants use a lot of water,
Yeah.
they use a lot of water.
So, yeah, I'll have that for you next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What was it? What was the date on the one in Moyoc again?
The Moyoc, November
Sewer plant
15th.
thing?
Yeah, it's
November
the
15th.
second Monday in November. I believe it's the 15th.
Cool. That's going to be specifically for that.
Yeah,
the
for,
wastewater, Moyoc wastewater.
Yep. We're going to give a presentation to the board, a workshop, telling them, okay, here's where we are, here's kind of some demand that we think is coming. For example, the Talisa Lakes development is a big one that's in our pipeline. And then, we get inquiries for commercial development frequently up there. But right now, we have the allotted amount out, and we're kind of at a holding pattern right now. So,
I appreciate the Board of Commissioner update, too.
Yeah, that's good to
That's
know.
great.
Yeah.
Don't always catch up.
No, we don't keep up with whether they agree with us or not. So that's always good to know.
Yeah.
and that's what I have for you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Take off. I thought we were done.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.